Hello there, friends. Welcome to BJJ Meditations. This is BJJ Meditations, episode number 71. I'm your host, Joe Hannon, Joe from Jersey, coming at you on a sweltering 90-degree day here in New Jersey. For some reason, I'm wearing a long sleeve t-shirt. It's just body dysmorphia. Call it a pump cover. Call it what you will. Anyway, I'm feeling a lot lighter than I was even earlier this morning because I just had a follow-up to a very hard conversation that was clarifying, and that's what's going to inspire this podcast for all intents and purposes. I'm thinking a lot this week in my prep for competition and both in my professional life as well about this concept of taking things seriously without holding on to them too tightly. We're all holding on to them loosely. This is something I thought a lot about during the pandemic because the pandemic upended a lot of worldviews. It upended a lot of notions about what we thought could and what we thought should happen in terms of politics, social order, justice, really sort of bedrock things that we humans rely on to make sense and to navigate our worlds. And there was just that period from 2020 to like late 2021, 2022, when everything we thought was concrete, we realized was quite porous and unstable. And I think the people who got hurt the most during this period of time were the people who sort of doubled down on their worldviews, despite the fact that reality was proving that what they believed in or what they thought is actually incorrect. The people who had I think those people suffer the most long term, but suffered the least short term. The people who suffered the most short term and probably are suffering the least long term are the people who were able to be a bit more malleable. They were able to discard their worldviews and adapt. And I think you can see this in Jiu-Jitsu too, literally and metaphorically. Like every now and then, someone comes along that just does Jiu-Jitsu radically different, and it forces everybody to pay attention and to, revisit their game, overhaul things. Like the Danaher Death Squad made everybody stand up and take attention to the fact that you can't ignore 50% of the human body. I mean, it's like a cliche at this point. But everybody realized there was a sea change, there was a paradigm shift. Okay, this is now something we need to take into account. And the people who took that into account quickly probably experienced a ton of frustration in overhauling their games, learning this new system of attacks and learning how to defend it. And there's certainly a lot of frustration, ego-related frustration that comes from being an absolute beginner all over again. But ultimately, those people had pain that was not deferred, right? They dealt with it then and there. But then we have some people, myself included, and this is more just like from a lack of time than a lack of interest, who just haven't adapted as readily and have paid the price. Like I've lost 2 of my most recent matches by leg attacks that I didn't see coming. And it's a knowledge gap I have to close. But the point I'm trying to make here is that something changes in the tactics. It forces you to shift in the near term or in the long term. You have to decide how you want to handle it. So I think a lot of the pain that comes from the long-term decision to stick with your guns comes from this idea of gripping too tightly. You're holding on to what was instead of letting it go and embracing what is. And another way we can experience this in Jiu-Jitsu is literally gripping, over gripping. Many of you, I'm sure, have had this experience where you're gripping so hard, but you're tired, or your grip slips or something, and somebody breaks your grip, and like it hurts. You may have even had an injury doing this. Like the middle finger on my left hand, to this day, is like still painful because I had this very thing happen. I don't even remember when. But yeah, I had a grip that was so tight, and somebody was just a little bit stronger than me, and they broke it, and the breaking of the grip caused an injury. And that's sort of my little tangible reminder of this principle that I'm trying to articulate today, which is when we're holding on to something too tightly, we're losing presence. The moment is ever changing. This can be in a jiu-jitsu match where you have gone in with a specific plan of attack that you want to execute, and you execute it to your own detriment because the match has evolved in a different direction. What we should do is release that grip on that thing that we are clinging to so tightly. And I suppose in the aftermath of a situation like this, it begs the question of, well, why were we gripping to this thing so tightly? And I can think specifically of a match I lost by ankle lock, straight ankle lock. The same guy straight ankle locked me in the gi and a no gi. What was I holding on to too tightly in that no gi match? I had a miserable performance in my gi match, and I just was so determined to roll better, to put on essentially like a more entertaining show for the people watching the match, that I opened up my guard in a moment where I shouldn't have, and I transitioned into De La Riva in a moment that I shouldn't have, and I put my foot somewhere where it shouldn't have been. And instead of being present to those three things that I just mentioned, what was in my mind was, I need to beat this guy summarily. Like, I need to put him away. I can't just win by an advantage here. And I was gripping too tightly to that notion of I have to win in a certain way rather than just dealing with what was happening, which was actually helping me. So I overgripped instead of releasing that grip of winning in a certain way. I overgripped. And this is a pattern of error for me as a competitor. This happened in Miami when I lost by toe hold there. I was so fixated on having a better opening to my match than I did at Masters Worlds that I was so overcommitted to this guard pull that it wasn't even a guard pull. The guy just kind of conceded a takedown from the guard pull because he saw that I was going to leave my foot exposed. And I didn't see it at all because I was just so in my head about I must do better than I did last time. I must put on a better stand-up performance than I did at Masters. And, now I'm not so sure I would make that error. I could be wrong. I'm sure I'll find out. But what I'm learning from this whole experience is to go in and prepare and have a plan and train with intention, but also just be ready to put it all out of your brain the moment the match starts. I think that in the past, when I've gone in with a plan and the plan has gone awry, I've lost the thread of the present moment. And that's kind of one pattern of error. And that's certainly what happened in Miami. And that's certainly what happened in the first example that I described. And then the other pattern of error is a really interesting one. And this is the one that just showed up in this professional dynamic I was talking about. And it's that when things are going right and I'm so close to victory, and then I lose. I lose because I let off the gas, or I lose because I almost think I can check out. I can take a break here because I'm up. This sort of happened at the New York Open in my second match. I was in this protracted closed guard battle with my opponent, and I finally was able to get to my feet, and he opened up the guard, and I was half past his half guard, and I was like, okay, I can ease up here now. I just needed to get out of that closed guard. I didn't have the energy or the strength for it or the wind because I was sick. So at that moment, I was like, I can work with this. Eventually, I'm going to pass this guy's guard. Eventually, I'm going to win. And as soon as that realization of eventually I'm going to win happened, that's, when I got choked. I was so close in my mind to victory that I sort of lost the thread. And this is kind of the same dynamic that was at play in this professional situation that I'm describing. I was over gripping to what was, and what was like this near win that wasn't. It didn't happen. And I was trying to recreate the circumstances of it. And it just, you can't conjure up the past, even though I was so tethered to it. And the right thing to do tactically and strategically was to let it go. So that's kind of what I'm sitting with right now as I think about qualitatively training to win Masters Worlds, qualitatively training to win the New York Open in August, I'm thinking about, how do I learn to let go of what was? How do I really learn to just set it aside and let it be, to just put it all down? I think that's one of the hardest things for me to sort out. And maybe this is true for you too, if you're listening to this, but there's so much shit that we carry. And when I say shit, I'm talking about burdens. They could be literal burdens. You know, it could be limitations of our physique. They could be limitations of our cognitive capacities, whatever. There are always going to be people out there who are bigger, stronger, smarter, more talented than we are, etc. Or they could be sort of psychological burdens that we carry, but we just never realize that we have the ability to put them down. And that's the sense I have with this stuff, is that there is a way to put it down. There's a way to just set it all aside and say, you know what? I'm not going to carry this anymore. It's not like someone saddled me with this. I have a choice here to let it go. So that's what I'm thinking about this week, is how do I let this stuff go? How do I not bring it with me into these next two competitions? How do I save my grips in the process? Because there are going to be times when I need to hold on to something. And how do I not waste my strength holding on to these things that I don't need to hold on to? And the overall question in my mind is, how do we ensure we're grappling with what is and not grappling with what was? I think that's the most important question for me to consider as I continue to prepare myself for the journey ahead. But weirdly, you know, I feel great about the journey ahead. I think having some success in New York a few months back really showed to me that I can do it. And then having this revelation from talking to Emily that, you know, conviction in yourself is a choice. I've chosen to believe in myself. I feel truly liberated. The question is, how do I channel that liberation into a quality training camp, and more importantly, into a quality performance on the day of competition? How can I be present to what is? How do I grapple with what is and not what was? So that's my work to do this week, folks. Hopefully that is some sort of useful reflection for you. This has been good for me. This has been good for me in terms of having accountability to you all to talk about what's going on as I get ready for these competitions. I feel like I have a responsibility to the show and to the audience, and it's not a big audience by any stretch. But I feel like I've made a commitment, and I think I vocalized this in an episode way back in the earlier days of this podcast. It was after this long period of silence where I just wasn't sure if I should be doing this or if people were getting value from it. And I emerged from that silence, and I made a commitment to you all that I'm going to keep doing this. And it might seem like I'm doing this for you, and in some ways I am. Like, this podcast is very much a service to all the people who live in an introspective nightmare like I do and happen to practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But you're also doing me a huge favor here, because I feel like I consistently need to show up for you. I need to be living and training qualitatively in such a way where things are emerging that are worth discussing or worth putting into words for the benefit of the audience. So you, the silent audience who I seldom hear from, you are very much a critical part of this journey of becoming, and I'm very grateful for your participation in that journey. That's all I got for you this week, folks. Thinking strategically about what I might want to do with BJJ Meditations in the future, and obviously it's going to continue, but I don't know what other forms it might take. I'm open to any ideas and suggestions you might have. There will always be this podcast. It will always be free. But I'm definitely interested in what might be useful to you, what might help serve you better as the listeners of this podcast. What do you find valuable? If you have any insights that you'd like to share with me, please email me at bjjmeditations@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. You can also contact me through the website. I received a lovely note from somebody who heard the episode on conviction and is going to be taking on Masters Worlds as a blue belt, I think, next year. And that meant the world to me. It really did, that this podcast could have a positive impact and help you realize something that was already dormant inside of you. That's what this is all about, is helping you guys see who you truly are and what you're capable of and going on that journey together. So thank you very much for that note. And I would love to hear from more of you. Please feel free to contact me about what you might want out of the BJJ Meditations experience. But that's all I've got for you this week, folks. It was great talking with you, and we will touch base again next week.